look around us and see division. Disagreements have turned to divide. Divide has turned to fear, and fear has turned to hate. Who shouts the loudest? And who hits the hardest? With racial tensions and political wars, people are looking for excuses to avoid rather than reasons to love. There has to be another way. There has to be a way to bridge the divide. In a world of chaos and slander, where does love fit? We propose it's the bridge over troubled water.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Shoreline Church. I'm Pastor Quinn, and this is
Donnie Carvonen.
Pastor Donnie Carvonen, and we just want to tell you happy 4th of July weekend.
Hey, guys over there at Crab Island, and those of you joining us at AJ's, as well as all the watchers who are joining us online.
Man, I'm expecting this to be a wonderful weekend. Do you have big plans this weekend?
It is amazing. I love the fact that we can spend time together. It's been a while since I've been up here speaking.
That's right.
In fact, I was scheduled to speak right on the eve of the coronavirus, and so we made a radical change and said, all right, we got to change our whole format.
Right.
So now I get a chance to come back and sit at the table with you, so this is going to be awesome.
This is really cool. I gotta just kind of brag on you for a second. You did a lot of stuff behind the scenes.
Oh, do tell.
Through quarantine. But man, I'm so grateful for you, and you helped us create some stuff that we're using so that people get to enjoy it in this fashion, and just well done, man.
I think I appreciate it. Thank you. And I think I would say there's a shout out to all the people behind the scenes and all of our vocations that had to make these shifts in a difficult time.
Yeah, speaking of that, how did you and your family do throughout this so far?
It's funny that you mentioned that because we were planning to redo our kitchen. So my wife and I, we're going to do
Carmen and Jaden, by the way.
You see the picture up there?
Yeah.
Yeah, my beautiful kids, my daughter and my wife. We decided, hey, we're going to redo our kitchen floor by ourselves. And it just so happened to come at the same time as the quarantine. So, hey, we just get extra time at the house to do that. And in my mind, you think that would be a great family team building thing, but as much as I'd like to admit it, I have to say that sometimes working with people you love so closely for so quarantine time, it can be challenging, but we got it all finished, which was awesome.
That's awesome.
Our daughter, I got to spend some time with Jaden a little more than normal, which has been cool. What about you?
So for those of you that might not know, my wife is Meg. She's actually a prayer and care coordinator here at Shoreline.
There's a picture of her.
There's a picture of her there with my daughter Lavender, who's 7, and my son Rhodes. He's actually about to turn 5.
Oh, wow.
Super crazy. He's like, Ninja Turtle birthday.
It's the best time for kids.
Oh, it's amazing. We're throw down. For us, I would say, Meg and I were super busy with stuff going on here at church. It's been amazing. Like we've been a part of a lot of crazy things that God's doing. It's been super cool. The kids, I would say overall handled it well, but just like anybody, we had some meltdowns.
Oh, really?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. The other day, Lavender was wanting something, and I was like, no, you can't have that right now. It's time for bed. And she stomps off, and then a couple minutes later, she comes stomping back, and she just has this look on her face, this emphatic look, and she says, I am torn apart. Do you know how hard I work to love you? And I was just like,
wow.
I was like, half of me was like cracking up inside because it's the cutest thing I've ever seen. And the other side is like, you can't disrespect me like that. Like, you cannot talk to me like that.
It's weird that your heart's being pulled in so many different emotions to that moment.
For sure. I think also, though, that the statement is so true. Like, I was like, wow, like, all of us feel torn apart right now because we're trying so hard to love each other, and it's such a challenge right now.
If you were to use that as sort of a snapshot of our nation, our neighborhood, we definitely see where it's hard loving people.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of things going on, and as much as I love living under the same roof as my family, sometimes we irritate each other, and there can be tensions. But we see this across the country. There's a lot of things that I love our country, especially 4th of July. I love the fact that we get to celebrate this. But in the same sense, it pains my heart to see the tensions here, not only the fighting, but just how people are being torn.
Yeah, I think sometimes we have to fight to see the best in people. We have to fight within ourselves to remember that all of us really want the same things. I mean, we all want healthy marriages. We all want healthy children. We want healthy communities. We want healthy businesses. And you can just keep going on and on and on down the list, and all those feel that way. Whether you're working at a grocery store, or you're in the military, or you're a pastor, or you're a president or a politician, we all want that on some level for ourselves and even for other people, right?
But I think the tension comes in how we get that. How do we get there?
Right.
And our expectations on how we're supposed to get there. The concept of the American dream.
Right.
Did it really live up to its truth?
Absolutely. When I think about the American dream, I can only think about my experience with the American dream. I think about my great grandfather, who was an immigrant from Italy, who moved here with nothing, and he built this pavement business and went on to pave more than highways and byways in Ohio.
Wow.
It's only been within recent years that his seal disappeared from the sidewalks and streets of Akron, Ohio. I can also think of my dad, who served in the Navy and worked really hard to protect our nation and made his way in the world. And so when I think about their stories and how that impacts my life, I'm grateful for the sense of honor that I gain, the entrepreneurial spirit that I've gained that's followed me into becoming a high school English teacher. Then that followed me, was a part of my desire to be in the music industry, and that's even a part of what I want to do as a pastor. And so I feel this sense of pride and belief that our nation can be great, right?
That's good. That's part of the
Right.
dream that you can pursue. But I can remember my growing up is I had a different experience, whereas
Right.
my parents come from totally different backgrounds.
Wow.
It was my mom came from a dairy farm in Michigan. My dad came from Helsinki, Finland, and somehow they met in Oklahoma.
Right.
And we moved to Florida.
Wow.
And that's where I'm from. My brother was born in Canada, so we've got
Right.
this really eclectic family.
Right.
Politically, my family is on two different spectrums. I'm the middle child of three, and if there was any type of poster child for bridge over troubled water, that's me being the peacekeeper.
Whoa.
A lot of times in our family, because early on, I think my parents tried to live the American dream. They did their best. They loved their kids. They
Right.
they loved God, but for whatever reasons, there was tensions that eventually our family split up at 12 when I was
Wow.
12.
Yeah.
And so here am I at 12 thinking, where's this American dream? Is it real?
Is it real?
We were going to church. Is this God thing real? Is it?
Right.
Is what they're saying true in my life? And I was torn, much like our country is
Yeah.
right before us.
I think we're living in a time where everyone is asking, is the American dream that I had in my head what I'm living out? Is it something that I can live out? I feel like it's like we've been handed a picture and we're starting to find out that the picture we thought it doesn't add up. The colors are off, the images are skewed, and there's still a lot of good stuff, but it feels very, very hard won, and sometimes it feels devastatingly so.
And when you come to a reality where your picture is different than what I'm picturing, the tensions mount.
Absolutely.
I can imagine when we're talking about Jesus, that his view on what the world should be,
Right.
totally different than what the people around him felt, especially
Right.
when he's trying to communicate it to his closest friends and to the
Right.
religious leaders and the crowds around him. He did his very best, and you often heard the phrases, the kingdom of heaven is like so-and-so, and they were struggling. We struggle with that concept of what that looks like.
We do. I think we feel like in order for us to get what we want, there's winners and losers.
Right.
That's I'm gonna win, and if I win, somebody else has got to lose. And like you said, even when Jesus was explaining what his kingdom was like, his audience was trying to determine, okay, who is the winner and who's the loser in this equation?
Is Rome going to win, or is the Jewish people going to win?
Right.
Is it going to be the Pharisees or the Sadducees? Is it going to be the foreigner or the local? And you could see that people had a hard time figuring out who Jesus was actually trying to say he loved.
And what's incredible about that is when the people that Jesus chose to love, in choosing to love those people, no matter who they were, he defied categorization.
He did.
I'm sure in our day, if Jesus was loving the people that that we would think are untouchable or he was going after. I mean, at any given moment, he could have been called like a socialist. He could have been called a Republican or left wing, a vegetarian. he could have been called a fruit, or he does CrossFit, or he's a hipster, or he's racist, or he's a bigot. Anytime someone put him in a box, he went the opposite direction and loved people in incredible ways.
It was amazing. He loved the unlovable, the
right.
untouchable, the lepers as well as the wealthy, the political as well as the forgotten. His definition of love was totally different, that we can totally now see how God sees this world's potential. It's totally different than the way what we see in the world's potential.
Yeah, Jesus made his kingdom and what his kingdom was about very clear, to the point that he said things like, my kingdom is not of this world.
That's good.
And he wanted to put a stamp on what he was about. And by saying this, he was essentially saying that my kingdom doesn't operate like the empires and the governments of the world do. It operates on a completely different level. Can you give us like some historical context on that, Donnie?
Because imagine he was talking there, he was proclaimed as the Messiah. And so when people start thinking about this promise of this Messiah, they were thinking of people like Moses, who came into Egypt and he was able to deliver through these miraculous signs and wonders, or like a judge like Samson, who had this remarkable strength and was able to save cities with this strength. Forcefully save it. Even when before Rome came in, there was this spiritual uprising within within Israel, that they decided, let's get back and get our hearts right with God and do things the right way. And so they revolted against all the occupying forces and got their independence for a short time. Then all of a sudden, the bigger power of Rome comes in and occupies them.
Yeah.
And so in their mind, it's might over might over might. And so when Jesus talks about his kingdom on earth, I can understand the confusion. Well, you're going to come in just like King David. You're going to come in just like Moses. You're going to come in and just be this ambassador of strength.
You know, when Jesus says things like, I didn't come to unify the house, I came to bring the sword, you know, I can imagine that they were confused about what.
They're like, yeah, bring the sword.
Bring the sword. Bring the sword. But then he talks about the kingdom in other ways. So he's using a lot of metaphors, a lot of stories, and it makes sense to me how his first followers didn't get it. And in fact, even though we can read about it, we've seen church history play out, sometimes we don't get it, you know? But I think one of the prime examples of this is when Jesus was about to get arrested before he was crucified. He's hanging out in this garden with his followers. The police come in to arrest him for saying something wrong.
Armed guards, yeah.
Armed guards. And so immediately his followers think, oh, this is the inciting incident. Once they pick on Jesus with force, he's going to have to fight back. And so they immediately grab a sword and go after these guys.
You're talking about Peter.
Peter, he chops this guard's ear off, and Jesus is like, whoa, bud.
Pump the brakes.
Pump the brakes. This is not what's going on here. This is not what I'm talking about. And my favorite part is, and it's kind of comedic, Jesus heals that guard's ear. He puts his ear back on him, and he tells Peter, put your sword away right now.
That's crazy.
You know, he that lives by the sword dies by the sword. I think what Jesus is saying is that there's another way to go about seeing heaven on earth happen.
It's true. The reality shift that Peter must have had at that moment, because in his mind, he went to the sword because that's what he was expecting. And all of a sudden, Jesus acts with compassion and love, said, no. That's not the sword I'm bringing.
For sure. I love to say this. If you go for the power play, you ain't doing it Jesus' way.
That's right. And I think Peter had a eureka moment, like, wow, that this is truly a different type of kingdom. His perception of what Jesus' agenda was not his perception.
Right. And I mean, he said that his kingdom has a unique set of laws that starts with love God with everything you've got and love your neighbor as yourself. That is the cornerstone of the new kingdom.
And I think that spoke even true when healing the person that you're supposed to arrest. You'd love them to the point where they're going to arrest you, do harm to you, but you still love them.
Absolutely.
That probably opened up Peter's eyes. Now, I can't diss Peter too much, because I think his heart was in the right place.
Right.
Because he wanted to protect his friend. He wanted to champion this message of Jesus Christ. And so he did what he thought was right. His heart was in the right place, but I think his agenda, his way of getting there, was a little off balance, was not.
And I think that you're absolutely right. I think a lot of us would resonate with that. And there's more, people in Jesus' life that show us that very same thing. I'm thinking about this other guy that was at first on the outside of the Jesus conversation. Okay. This guy was a perfect politician. He was religiously elite. He had all the right connections to the movers and shakers, including Rome.
Oh, so he was in the in crowd.
He was in the in crowd. He had a whole mob behind him. He's got almost kind of like a mob boss. Like he was in fact going to the lengths of hurting people that follow Jesus because he believed his way was so right. If you've ever read the Bible or you're into Jesus, you probably know this guy's name. He's called Paul.
Yeah, and Paul was amazing because I think he started out as a religious Pharisee. He went to the schools because he wanted to live a godly life.
Right.
He would even defend and said, I live a flawless, I abide all the rules. I went to temple every time I gave. But yet, even in his pursuit of being a holy, pious guy, his heart may have been in the right place in the beginning, but his agenda, his path was totally off center.
But when Jesus changed him, his perspective changed
Absolutely.
too. And we know this because he as he finally understood Jesus' heart, he was able to reflect in a letter to some friends. He said this in his own words: carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ.
His agenda totally changed.
Yeah. It's funny to me that you've got these two men. One is this poor fisherman fighting his way to get to the top. Then you got this other guy who's at the top, and he's lording it over the poor people or people that don't believe the same thing that he does. And they both learned something really important, which is that you can have the heart. If you have the heart of God, then you can have the right agenda.
And it all shifted with an encounter with Jesus.
That's right.
It's amazing thing is, one of them didn't have to lose to the other.
That's right.
They found the common ground by getting closer to Jesus.
Another way to put that is, you don't have to rob Peter to pay Paul.
I see what you did there. That's good.
Both of them could get what their hearts long for. It makes it really clear: the person who feels less than and under the boot of the man, and the man that's lost sight of what matters because he's traded in love for power, can find heaven on earth in Jesus.
I love the fact that you can trade your agenda, that love for power, whatever it may be, when you find Christ's agenda, that love your neighbor message, that can totally change everything. It change a city, change a community.
That's right. You have two people on opposite ends of politics and religion and socioeconomics who both want the same thing. They want heaven on earth. They want things to work right.
And how they defined it was different.
How they defined it and how they approached it to making that happen. And I think that what resonates with me about that is we feel the same things. Like I said earlier, here we are with our pictures of America in our hands, and we're shouting at each other about how our picture is better than someone else's.
It reminds me at those church Christian rallies, like, I love Jesus more. No, I love Jesus more. I love Jesus more than you. No, I love Jesus more than you. Let's fight because I love Jesus more.
Right.
It's like, I want to provide for my family. No, I want to provide for my family. No, you don't. I want to provide for my family.
Right.
And we get these tensions going, and it's just how we approach it. It's different, but the message is ironically.
It's crazy to me how that affects all of us, even those people that maybe you're watching today and you don't believe anything about Jesus. You're not following Jesus. But would you concede that you want healthiness in your life? You want a healthy family, you want healthy kids, you want a healthy community, right? And sometimes we subscribe to this idea of the American dream, and we also feel right now very deeply this I am torn apart.
Oh, your daughter,
do you know how hard I work to love you?
It's hard loving it. Yeah.
But here we believe that if you follow Jesus, that what he's offering us is better than the American dream. He's showing us how to make this thing that's better a reality. So again, to your question, is it real? Is this real? Is this possible? The answer emphatically is yes.
Yes, and I believe if we were to say this, to summarize with our series of Bridge Over Troubled Water, we don't have to have sameness to have oneness.
That's right. Our radically different views and values are shaped by our individual experiences. You can't get around that. It's important to recognize that where we live, how we were raised, how we were educated, if we were educated, what we've been told, what we've seen, what we've experienced, what we've seen others experience, that those things can actually bring us together around our shared values.
I think it's interesting that even the Apostle Paul, later on, he'd talk about the diversity of the body.
Right.
How this hand, and we reflect on the words of Christ, how the one hand is different than the foot, and the eye is different than the ear.
Right.
That diversity is necessary to have the oneness that we have.
Absolutely. It makes us think too that if Jesus wants us to refuse to be divided, then each of us need to grow in such a way that we can disagree radically, love unconditionally, and pray for unity. And if we take it a step further, it's like, are we, like Peter and Paul, able to change our agendas in order to better reflect the heart of God for the world?
Wow. That's a tough question, because if we really think about the transformation that we saw both in Peter and Paul,
right,
how they radically changed their life, how one was more centered focus on what's best for me, but then when they had an encounter with Jesus and they realized his love for the community, his love for the world, those outside of his norm, outside of their neighborhood.
Wow.
Peter went from being just concerned about fishing and the Jewish community, but he went out to the outsiders, which was unheard of at that time.
Right.
Paul went from being egocentric and personal driven and career driven to being someone who got on a boat and sailed all over the known world at that time to talk about someone else's agenda, which was Christ.
Wow.
And to redeem. That type of shift is, I think, what loving your neighbor is.
Absolutely. To think that these guys turn the world upside down. This little no-name, nothing town, Jerusalem, to the rest of the world. We're still talking about it today. And it's because they finally understood Jesus' platform.
That's right.
That there's only one hill to die on, and Jesus died on it for you and for me. And
I love that message, because it wasn't like he snuck it in at the back end like a commercial. It was one of his first messages, what we find in Matthew 5, about how he just talked about, this is the kingdom of heaven.
Right.
And he starts talking about, this is how I see how we should love people. This is how I see people. And I think it was until after Peter saw Jesus die and come back to life that he had that aha moment, like, wow, his kingdom is really this way.
Absolutely.
And all those words came back.
Man, let's read those words. So
right.
if you want to follow along, we're going on to Matthew 5. It says something like this: Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the sons and daughters of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven.
That message totally put the community on their ear. They were never expecting this.
This is something new.
It was used to be rules of, you got to follow this, and then God would appease you, you would be blessed. But here he's talking about, I want you to love the person next to you.
Right.
And I want you to see them the way I see them. See the people who are broken. See the ones who are meek. See the ones who are reserving the strength, who are holding back, and honor that, because theirs is truly the ones who are going to be blessed.
And this totally represents a community-sized message, right? This is not about just individuals. It's about individuals functioning within community.
A neighborhood, if
a
you will.
neighborhood, belonging together, and so that makes me want to take it another step.
Okay.
Because Jesus' message has impacted my life. That's why I'm here.
Right.
And so I have to ask myself, and maybe you want to ask yourself too, who are the people in your neighborhood that Jesus is inviting you to love?
Oh, that's a great question, because if you think about this message, he spoke it to every demographic,
right?
The untouchable,
right.
the unlovable,
right?
But yet he had time for every one of them.
That's right.
And so that makes me think maybe I should pray about, not just pray,
Absolutely.
but maybe there's opportunities where I can find an opportunity to love people in a unique way that I haven't done in the past.
Yeah, I mean, I think it encourages us to reach out to people with different perspectives. I'm thankful for the people in my life that don't follow Jesus, because they offer me an outside perspective. And I don't just look at them as people that I want to win over to the kingdom. I mean, I do, but I look at them as people that God created, that God values first. And so as their stories, as they tell their stories about how they live, and as I get to know them, and as they get to know me, this really powerful thing happens. It's God changes us both, and so we have to seek out people that might have a different perspective than us.
I think that that type of worldview is bigger than my personal dream or even the American dream.
Absolutely.
I think Jesus doesn't just want us to have just an American dream. I
Right.
think it's so much bigger.
Absolutely. I think the question we have to begs asking is, does he have an American dream? And like you just alluded to, he doesn't just have a dream for America. He has a dream for the world.
That's right. So if we're going to wrap this up with a couple questions here, if we really think that Jesus wants us to refuse to be divided,
Right.
how can we grow in loving people unconditionally?
Absolutely. And then a second question would be, how can I change my agenda in order to better reflect the heart of God?
I find that to be a tough question because I love my agenda.
Right. Of course you do.
And so
Of course I do.
The question
We all
is,
do.
how can I love other people's
Right.
value more than my agenda?
Pastor Jimmy Rollins said something to the effect of this. He said that policy can change laws, but the presence of God changes hearts.
Well, that's good.
And so I think that what this question speaks to is that when I allow God's presence in my life to change my heart, it also changes my agenda and does begin to reflect the heart of God. And that's the ultimate goal.
And that brings us to the last question here is, who are the people in your neighborhood that Jesus is inviting you to love?
Whoa. Yeah. And if you don't know, like you mentioned earlier, you could pray about it. You could totally pray about who is God asking you, inviting you to love and reach out to. And if you're looking for someone, if you're like the prayer thing is something new to you, maybe you should just start with looking for someone that's different than you.
Someone who looks and totally different than you, that's a good person to start loving
Absolutely.
unconditionally. You know what I was thinking practically, just to give us a next step for those of you looking to get involved and to love your neighbor, we're doing an event next Saturday.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
With a church where we're
awesome.
serving the community, and you're trying to find ways to love your community with no strings attached, no bait and switch. It's just, hey, we're just going to love people because they're people.
Right.
Make sure you check us out on the app. You can register and sign up. It's free.
Right.
You'll get a T-shirt. You'll get a chance to meet some new people as well
Yeah.
as to love the neighborhood that you're in.
Yeah.
And I think that'd be a practical next step.
I think that is one way to definitely bring heaven to earth. And it makes me, as we sort of wrap it up and reflect on our message, it reminds me that I don't want to settle for the American dream when we can all have the kingdom of heaven.
And I think of the diversity that is represented not just at this community, but around us, that we can celebrate our distinctions. We don't have to have sameness to truly have oneness. You know?
We can be the party.
Oh,
How
I
about
love that.
Well, on that note, can we pray?
Absolutely.
God, I just thank you for what you've shown us today. We thank you for America and the things that you want to do through us in this country. And Lord, would you just help us to continually open ourselves up to the way that you want to change our hearts and make our hearts heaven on earth so we can make this place heaven on earth. Thank you for who you are in our lives. We're so grateful that you showed up and that you change everything. We love you so much. In your name, Jesus, amen.
Amen.
Amen.